This is a moment in Jewish history. Last week, I talked about the tomb of Rachel, burial site of the biblical matriarch Rachel. Unlike the rest of the patriarchs and matriarchs, she is buried on the road to Bethlehem, whereas Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, and Jacob and Leah are buried in the cave of Machpelah in Hebron. I have been there many times, and much can be written about it, so I would like to focus on something I mentioned last week, which is that Rachel took one for the team and sacrificed her space in the cave of Machpelah, known as the entrance to the Garden of Eden, while Mama Rachel waits for her children to return to their borders. And this insight comes from a story about Max Nordau. Max Nordau was a close friend of Theodor Herzl and helped him form the World Zionist Organization back in the 1890s. He was born and raised in a Jewish family, but quickly became a staunch assimilationist. He is quoted as having written about himself the following: "When I reached the age of 15, I left the Jewish way of life and the study of Torah. Judaism remained a mere memory, and since then I have always felt as a German and as a German only." Nordau became a well-known and controversial writer for his works such as Degeneration and Conventional Lies of Society. But all that changed with the Dreyfus Affair. Alfred Dreyfus was a French officer falsely accused of treason. His trial unleashed a wave of Judeophobia, and Max Nordau was one of the many Jewish Europeans who began to believe that Zionism was the answer. The following story is told by Nordau's friend, the eminent scholar Abraham Shalom Yehuda, in his autobiography. On the second night of the First Zionist Congress in Basel, Nordau spoke in German, giving a long speech. He mentioned several times as a motto 3 words from Jeremiah in Hebrew, VeShavu Banim legvulam, our children have returned to their borders. When asked by a young representative at the Congress how he found this verse, especially in Hebrew, for this did not fit Nordau's educational background, Nordau replied, "I know these words from the person to whom I am obliged all my Judaism and Zionism, a person whose name I don't even know, a person who was, in essence, only a little boy of 8 or 10, and this is what happened. I have a children's clinic in Paris. A woman, an immigrant from Poland, her hair covered with a scarf, came in with a pale boy, 8 or 10, sick for 3 weeks. Someone recommended that she bring him to me. I took out a form for a new patient and tried to speak to him in our local language, but he could hardly understand French. I asked his mother, who was also very poor at French, and she said, no, he doesn't go to a regular school, he goes to a cheder, a Jewish religious school. I scolded her harshly. This only causes anti-Semitism. We have opened the door for you, the gates to the country, to refugees from Poland. Why doesn't your child learn the national language here? She apologized and said that he is still young and that her husband is from the old generation, but that he will grow and study in a gymnasium, modern school, and will learn the language. In anger, I asked the child, in cheder, what did you learn? His eyes lit up, and in Yiddish, which I understood because of my German, told me what he had last studied in cheder. Jacob, he said, was dying, and he invited Joseph and commanded him, swearing him, pleading before him, please don't bury me in Egypt. There is the cave of Machpelah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebekah, and there I buried Leah. Take me from Egypt and bury me with them. And when I came from Padan, Rachel died in the land of Canaan, on the way to Ephrat, and I buried her there, on the way in Bethlehem. Why, in the middle of Jacob's request, does he tell the story of the tomb of Rachel? Rashi says, and this is all the child could talk about, 8 or 10 years old, speaking about the sages, that Jacob felt a necessity to apologize to Joseph and say, I bother you like this, to take me from Egypt to Hebron, and I myself didn't bother to take your mother Rachel, and despite that I was very close, next to Bethlehem, even into the city I didn't take her, I buried her on the way. But I am not guilty and did not act wrongly. God wanted it this way. He knew the murderer Nebuchadnezzar would, in the future, exile the sons of Rachel, her sons, during the first destruction, And when she would leave her grave and weep and wail and her voice would be heard, Rachel weeps for her children. But the Lord responds to her, "Stop your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears, because there is a reward for your actions and a hope for the future, and the children will return to their borders. VeShavu Banim legvulam." And I, said Dr. Max Nordau, I didn't know what to do with myself. I turned to the window so that the mother and child wouldn't see the tears rolling down my cheeks, and I said to myself, "Max, aren't you ashamed of yourself? You are an educated man, known as an intellectual, with a doctor's degree, but you don't know anything about the history of your people. From all the holy scriptures, nothing? And here, this sick child, weak, an immigrant, a refugee, and he speaks of Jacob and Joseph and Jeremiah and Rachel as if it were yesterday. It all lives in front of his eyes." I wiped the tears from my cheeks, and I turned to them and said in my heart, "A people with children like this that actually live their past, they will have a sparkling future." In the weekend newspaper, I saw an advertisement. "Whoever believes that the fate of the Jewish people is important to them, please call to help find an answer. Dr. Theodor Herzl." I called immediately. When we founded the Zionist Congress, at the first one, when I was honored to speak and give a speech, the figure of that little boy, whose name I don't even remember, stood in front of my eyes. But those words I will never forget, because they are the foundation of Zionism. They are the pillar of Judaism. VeShavu Banim legvulam, and the children will return to their borders. The organization that Herzl and Nordau formed successfully led to the creation of the independent state of Israel. Max Nordau is buried in the historic Trumpeldor Cemetery in Tel Aviv, which is located at the end of Hebron Street. This has been a moment in Jewish history. For questions or comments, or for past shows, you can visit benbresky.substack.com. Thank you to all the listeners, and Shalom.